Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. And pleased to welcome you to the 2022 SSAC Competitive Advantage Talks, presented by Kager, also known as the Craft Analytics Group. My name is Gaurav Verma, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce the presentation, The ROI is in Reach, presented by Wasserman. Please join me in welcoming Shelley Pissarra, Executive Vice President, Global Insights and Strategy at Wasserman.
Thank you. Green button means go. We're good to go. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? So I thought this was at 11, so 10:15, which is good because it means, we're just ahead of schedule. So you might have a little more impulsive commentary than you would have at 11 if I would have read through my slides one more time. But I'm happy to be here with you all and happy to chat a bit about the ever-loving quest to get to ROI. And it's a journey I think probably everyone in this room is on in some form or fashion, whether you're in this business or not, or just trying to figure out if all this grad school expense is really going to be worth it. I can't quite help you with that today, but I can talk to you about a space you could potentially work in that would at least give you a lot of joy in being in the sports and entertainment part of the analytics business. Unique facet to this presentation today is I'll actually talk a bit about how at Wasserman we approach measuring partnership performance, but also talk a bit about where we bring partners in as a form of investment and partnership to help us get better and help bring a new solution into the industry. So that's kind of the crux of what you'll see and hear from me today. So I'll just dive right in. So who we are. So show of hands, who's familiar with Wasserman in here? Pretty much everybody, right? So we think of ourselves as a connections agency, and we're a connections agency because we serve audiences. And we serve audiences by bringing together a bunch of stuff they love, right? We bring together brands, properties, and that's a reflection of products you love, categories you love, maybe some stuff you don't love, but maybe they help you have a sports or entertainment experience that is kind of out of this world, and from a brand perspective, you reconsider them. Then we have this whole slew of athletes who are absolutely phenomenal. I don't know how many of you saw Title IX yesterday with Sue, and if you saw my last panel, that meant you weren't watching Sue on another panel that she was doing on basketball. But we have all of these wonderful points of connection for consumers and fans through just the way we work at Wasserman. And our whole goal is to bring that together to serve a consumer need, right, and help everybody kind of grow against their objectives that they have at hand. So with that in mind, we have to find the best way to do that and bring you solutions that we believe will pay back. And not just pay back in dollars and cents, but pay back in brand equity, consumer satisfaction, and frankly, maybe your overall corporate initiative of how you want to show up and be thought about from a brand perspective. In the middle here, you can see a bit of the construct of our organization. So Wasserman has several specialty areas that we have brought in very, very thoughtfully. We are not a holding company. We will never be a holding company. We actually realize when we need to build a muscle and we bring it into the mix so that we can better serve our clients. Hence, why I'm even here talking about our partnership today with Fanai is we brought them into the mix because we're like, hey, we need help here. And we need help here, and we think you'll be a great partner. And if we partner early enough with you, maybe we can build this together. So why partnerships? Great question. And it's funny, after all of this time, an amazing success that we've seen in the marketplace across the board. Insert sporting event here, and you've seen brands and properties working together to bring that to life in the best possible way to really enhance the fan experience for just about ever, right? It's because brands are then able to build cultural capital that they likely couldn't build, or at least not as effectively, without the help of that property, that team, or that athlete. So think about it this way. If you're partnering with an athlete, or as a brand, partnering with an athlete or a team or a property, you now are able to move into a space that by yourself you didn't have the equity or kind of right to play in. And so you're now building cultural capital. You're building the ability to connect with a fan on a new basis that you didn't have before. And you get credit for that. not just in sales, but you get credit for that in how people feel about your business and even think about you. And that all means something. But it really starts with cultural capital and how you show up in your consumers' lives day in and day out. Guess what? They work, right? And I'm going to talk to you a bit about how we prove that out day in. We prove that out day in and day out on behalf of our clients. We've been working with American Express for over 20 years, managing their strategy, their partnership, and they would be fine with me telling you they are such a grooved business that they're down to measuring performance and success way ahead of time. They actually predict it on one metric. It took 20 years for us to get there. Actually, we've been using the one metric for almost a decade. But we figured out exactly how to analyze that performance and think about it relative to the card member, that we can basically say, if it's going to score here, we know it's going to work. Great. Move it forward. If it's not going to work. And every time we do something new, it feeds that engine, and we're able to make better choices. AT&T. We manage over 70 partnerships with AT&T. It's a massive roster that we're constantly evaluating, constantly thinking about what's working for them, what isn't, what areas of the business do they want to grow in, how do they best reach that audience. You know, and AT&T definitely has a huge challenge because a lot of their business is in services that you really only hear about them when something goes wrong. So we have to find ways for them to bring joy and excitement to their fans when maybe their products aren't necessarily in the best position to do so. But it gives them another look. It gives them a place to start to build a little bit of brand love, brand appreciation, versus it just being so functional or transactional. So partnerships work. And now we're getting to the place that we can really figure out just how well they work. So a little bit of a spectrum up on this chart for you. And if you think about live events are actually pretty easy to measure in the sense of you have a captive audience. You can look at that audience. Did they or did they not do the thing you wanted them to do? Do they or do they not feel the way that you want them to feel about something when you ask them? But they're there. You have access to them. You can get a pretty good idea as to whether or not that event is working. If you have a longer tail on purchase and so on, you'll follow up later on and see if you can attribute that back. We're actually going to talk about creating that connection today. A lot of what we do in terms of measuring performance is at the exposure and perception level. That's pretty grooved. And I know there's a handful of folks in here, good friends of ours, and a couple of friendly competitors as well, that do a lot in this space too. And that's where you're starting to think about how am I going to play back to my partners on the brand side. And their boss is saying, if you're going to distribute budget here, it's worth this much, versus if you're going to distribute it in another area of marketing mix. Exposure and perception helps you in that space. So think of exposure as media value and reach. Perception starts to get into the softer space, and this is where we're looking at the impact on your brand, the equity impact, the perception of your brand that may or may not have changed when you've had this exposure, you've had this event. In this particular case here, there's a Captain Morgan effort with MLS going on, where it was really about kind of elevating Captain Morgan with that audience and really saying this is no longer the dorm room alcohol. This is not the bottle that you're going to find on the floor of a frat party. You might still find it there, but we actually want you to think about it in a new context. So they were really looking to reach that audience through exposure and then drive perception, improve perception. And then finally, purchase. This is where we really start to get into the holy grail, and this is where we'll spend a bunch of time today, is thinking about how do partnerships get close enough to that point of purchase that they can have an immediate impact on that decision making. So if the moment of truth is potentially on your phone, on your laptop, or for anyone who's still going to retail, which by the way, retail is not dead, but going into retail, how can we make those partnerships work in driving that decision making? In this case, for Coors Light, they really were doing a big college campus blitz at the time, and what could be better than actually thinking about using sports there, right? So it makes a lot of sense. So we'll talk about how we can actually measure that going forward. I talked about those 3 types of events on the last page, and in this particular case, I'm trying to give a little more purpose to them. So we use a practice like this, the marketing pendulum, and really think about it looking on the page left to right is kind of your broader awareness driving capabilities or tactics The middle is about better understanding and becoming more familiar and really knowing a brand. And then the right-hand side is all about loyalty, advocacy, being loved. And for those of you who have eyes that can actually read that page, which I would not be able to, you can see that we've actually plotted out underneath all of the tactics that kind of fall into each of the buckets. This is a great place to start when you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to get into partnerships, and I think they can serve a purpose. I definitely know that they can help me reach this target audience I'm looking for, but what should I do? Where am I in development with this? How do I think about this? What's the best way to reach my consumer and get them to do what I want them to do? So this is a bit of a planning tool that we use as we work with our clients. Well, it's only as good as our ability to measure the performance of it. So we really look at 4 major variables in driving performance. We think about overall media impact, that's that exposure I talked about. Brand impact, that's the touchy-feely stuff. Business impact, this is where it gets dicey. This is where we're starting to get closer to ROI. And we're saying, what is the actual business impact? What is the sales return? What is the thing that we wanted them to do, and are they doing it? And then finally, community impact. Community impact, we always had lumped in with audience for a really long time. And you would see it show up a little bit in perception. You would see it show up in brand impact. But the last 3 years have really taught us something, that the movement to walk the talk is alive and real, and it works. And I'm not going to go deep into this today at all, but the ability to impact the community around you matters, and it shows up in performance, and that's very different from just, am I hitting the right audience? So we've actually moved from 3 to 4 variables in the way that we think about performance. So where do you start? Well, let's start with the biggest budget first, right? You've got to talk about those media dollars. So for anyone who's in here, and I don't think there are a lot of brands in the house, but you've got to figure out how you keep your media spend moving first and foremost, depending on your objectives. Measuring this, everybody's doing it. We're doing it. It's where you start. It's the biggest dollars. You kind of have no choice. But start here, great. You don't know any of the why, the how, and sales impact yet either. Then we move to brand impact. This is, call it your classic journey, right? You're going to take everything from, do they know about me? Do they understand me? All the way down to, how do they feel about me? Would they even consider buying me? And then get into, we can do a net promoter score if you want, but that's basically thinking about, will they tell others? Will they tell their friends? How much buzz will this have afterward if I've made them happy enough? So you've got big budget. Now what's that doing for my brand, and how do they feel about me? And that last piece that we're going to have to look at is going to be the purchase front. So on the brand awareness front, what this leads us to do as we start to move down that funnel is think about what has changed. And if things have changed, and the gray line is exposed fans, if you will, or partnership-aware fans versus the orange line. And you can see, in this particular case, they're trending ahead across 4 major metrics: familiarity, sentiment, purchase consideration, recommendation. Like, this is amazing. I probably need to supplement this with, did they actually go buy it? They're thinking about it, but did they actually go buy it? And you'll see that over time, on the brand front, it works. So tenure versus time here in this particular case, we know that over the years that you can continue to raise up, and you see the 2 dotted lines, and that's moving across the chart in terms of tenure, in terms of brand awareness, familiarity, perception, and all of the markers underneath that will rise as well. So with these 2 things, you're like, hey, this is great. I saw my metrics rise. I see that over time, and this is all mocked up data. You can see it's sample data, so nobody run around and say, I saw that, Party City was way down in the left-hand corner at this particular time. But with this in mind, you feel really, really good. But you still can't answer the question of, are they doing what you wanted them to do? So we can get to a great brand impact ROI based on the information that we have at hand and some help from internally inside the brand or partner that we're working with. You might remember from that pendulum chart, we start to look at the tactics individually. What worked in that be known bucket? So did we do some brand work there to understand perception? What worked in that be understood bucket? And then what worked in that be loved bucket? In this particular case, this was a big awareness driving, kind of early funnel, early stage type of an initiative that we've laid out here, but we're still missing the final sell-through. We're still missing the ability to really understand performance at an asset level. But you sure got a lot of stuff here that looks good. So getting into impact on the business front, as we get into the numbers themselves, we think about it in 3 ways. So direct value, pretty straightforward. So what can we track from an on-site perspective? Digital clicks to sales, partner B2B. B2B is a huge space now, especially as folks are reemerging from 2 years of hibernation. Think about how do I go back and build relationships with my clients through hospitality or access or something so that I can essentially win more business one to another versus it being B2C. Indirect value is going to be overall sales uplift over time. Am I 2 points ahead of the market that didn't have this? Customer retention and loyalty. Remember, that's going to be way over in that be-loved side of things. Those things actually tend to be incredibly expensive because you're looking to drive that last bit of value to keep them with you for the long, long time. And then customer acquisition, also a very expensive tactic. So you think about the kind of the 2 ends of the spectrum. You're going to spend a lot to go and acquire a customer. And at the very, very end, to keep those most loyal, likely your most lucrative customers, you're going to spend a lot to keep them. So you really want to know if that's working. And then finally, you put that all together, and it gives you an idea of total value. So we get there, and this is an example sheet that we have in terms of really being able to nail it down. No, there's no numbers on here. Can't share them. But really being able to nail it down. But guess what? It's hard. It's hard today because it requires a ton of coordination, not just with your client, but with data sources, your other partners, whomever you have in the mix doing this work with you, and it shouldn't be this hard. So enter some ways of thinking about it that are new, and that's in our relationship with Fanai. So we invested in Fanai last year. We've been talking to them for quite a long time and really thinking about how do we work together to get to a level of attribution that lets us really understand asset level performance, performance overall, and are they doing the thing? Are they doing the thing we want them to do once they've been exposed to the partnership? So what is Fanai? Fanai empowers brands to measure the direct retail impact of sponsorship investments. So they're going to help you understand, and they're helping us understand and add to our portfolio the ability to say, I invested X, I should be getting Y back, and I'm going to complete that story of I know what I got in media value, I know what I got in brand impact, and then finally, what did I get in total dollars? And they do it through connecting audiences. So we talk a lot about reach is only so good if you're reaching the right people and if you're getting to do the thing. So we're going to look at the whole potential set of folks that we might want to reach in a particular partnership or in a particular situation. And then we're going to compare that to who did they actually reach and ask, did they do the thing, right? So we're looking at potential audiences and actual audiences. The cool part about our relationship is we each can kind of bring the 2 pieces together instead of 20 different people doing it and start to look at what actually happened. So tracking performance and making this happen, this is a little bit of an eye chart, but we thought we'd show you how we throw it all in and mix it together. But if we're bringing consumer client audiences, Wasserman, on behalf of a brand, and they're bringing actual audiences through a myriad of partnerships across the full ecosystem, right, a participation. So it's not just about going in and potentially buying more at retail, but what happened at Fanatics? Do we have the ticket information? What other things did they go to? What do we have across the media landscape, right? And you can see through their partnerships, we're able to pull together a really holistic view of the folks that were exposed to this partnership or this experience, what actions they took against that, right? And then we bring in that purchase data kind of fills the rest of the answer in terms of if it is not just a fast-moving consumer good, but a service, can we actually marry that all together, saying, wow, now we understand the full spectrum of you doing the thing and what that's going to mean to us from a performance perspective. So it makes reporting impact really easy. Fanai does a ton of work with PepsiCo. PepsiCo is also an investor in them. They're part of the PepsiCo Labs program, and we're all kind of co-building this a bit together, which is a fantastic thing. So here's an example dashboard that we might look at the end of a program. And you see the 0.83 there. That would be your return on your investment. If you spend $1, you're getting 83 cents back. You might look at that and say, oh, I don't know. But that's why this is a piece of the puzzle, because that's not the silver bullet. It's now an answer we have on what it cost to get your spend back, or get your fan to do the thing in that particular partnership. Do the thing might be buy whatever product or sign up for whatever service, but it's not done in isolation. You may have grown brand health or brand equity in that market by 5 points. Remember I said customer acquisition is one of the most expensive stops along the journey. So 0.83 might not be too bad. It might actually be fantastic. And in the perspective of making decisions moving forward, this 0.83 may be way more valuable than something where you're getting a $3, $4 return because you're already super well developed in that market. They know all about you, and you're kind of wasting these less expensive tactics or whatever your tactics you're doing there to continue to kind of hammer that same group of people. So let's think about kind of balancing that out. So there isn't any one portion of this three-pronged approach. Think about, reach, exposure, brand, and business that doesn't need the other. So while this is getting us closer, much closer to solving the ROI issue, it's not getting us there alone. So that's the really cool part about our partnership is we really handle kind of the top end of the spectrum, and Fanai is really helping us crack the code on the bottom end so that we can create the most holistic view of performance. So we have a project going with Duncan right now where we're taking a look at the structure of their partnerships to maximize their spend and their reach. We're going to identify growth opportunities and then bring back some recommendations. So continuing the journey of building the case studies and showing folks what that looks like in the marketplace. And as we take action, this is a bit of what I'm saying in terms of it all needs to work together, right? We need to really think about our audience and then our performance. Remember, to get at that, we're saying, are we reaching the right folks? Are they doing the thing that we want them to do? And then getting into brass tacks of partnership performance. So this is an example of a scorecard that we use to help folks take action, right? So we look at reach, we look at that audience alignment, and then we look at that partnership performance. What we're now able to do is add an extra box down here on the bottom saying, in this particular case, we're looking at sports partnerships. Did that audience that we can now match by looking at that full ecosystem of where they could do the thing we wanted them to do, whatever brand I am, did they do that, and how do we weight that into our scorecard and complete that story? Something that we didn't have before. That then leads you to be able to take this type of an action, which would be optimize your portfolio. We actually go through this exercise where we plot it all out, and we say, how am I thinking about this moving forward? Is this something that still has a ton of potential for me? So top of the quadrant here is partnership performance. Audience reach and alignments on the left-hand side, and or top of it, or the vertical. God, what is wrong with me? That's that 15 minutes or 45 minutes ahead of time that just got me there. So the vertical is partnership performance. The horizontal line is audience reach and alignment. So we go through this exercise with our clients each and every year, and now being able to actually talk about it at the asset level, it's not necessarily thinking, oh, am I reimagining this entire partnership? Just a piece of it? Is it working for me overall, or do I have that crazy return on investment where I've, like, in triplicate, talked to the same people across 3 different marketing tactics? And then we'll lay out those decisions on this quadrant and be able to use that to manage conversations, manage decisions, go back to where I'm getting my budget and say, hey, look at this. We can make this even better. So it's working. We're seeing progress across all 3 metrics. But now we have the tools and capabilities to identify within and across partnerships how to reimagine them, maybe rebalance the portfolio a little bit to really create that connection with our fans and consumers. So in summary, partnerships work, right? Measurements sharpening. If you think about the brand funnel, we're really honing in on this bottom triangle now. And there's opportunity and optimization. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? We don't have to make such binary decisions. The 3 pieces work together, and the more credibility, the more apples to apples comparisons you can help your brand partnership partners bring into their budget meetings, advance their agendas, and grow their businesses, the better off we all are, right? And the more fun you get to have working in this space as students coming out of this graduate degree that you're trying to figure out, can I get my ROI on this? There's lots of opportunity here. And there's more than enough to go around. So thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'll take them.
Thank you, Shelley. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone over to you.
And I did want to let you know that Johannes and Adam, Johannes is the founder of Fanai, and Adam Holt, they're sitting down here too. If you guys have any questions on their engine, you got to go there. I just get to come up here and talk about it. But I'm happy to talk about the process.
Great presentation. Thank you for that. I'm curious with the comments around opportunities in optimization. Before working with the Bears, I came from a CPG marketing company, Epsilon, that many are probably familiar with. And optimization, real-time in-campaign, was a huge concern of a number of companies we worked with, particularly over COVID. Just trying to see, what was working, and if anything was clearly not working a week into campaign, having the flexibility to sort of change that or turn it off. I'm curious what examples you might be able to share anecdotally you've seen sports teams or partners use within the sports analytics industry, just of making those real-time optimizations.
Yeah, so I have a couple. I think when you have control of the tactic, obviously it's a lot easier, right? So think in the social and digital space where you can turn things on and off super quickly. It makes a really big difference. I'll give you an example. I won't name the brand, but we did some work in the golf space a couple years ago where we are actually doing overnight returns on pin placement, right? And they were branded pins. And then there were other, call it markers around the venue that were around the green. And we were trying to optimize brand presence based on pin placement and the combination of pin placement and these other markers that were branded. So whether it was like seats or, it could have even been garbage cans or whatever. I don't recall everything that was in there. But overnight, we could talk to them about moving that stuff around based on pin placement, and or what we actually found out is it wasn't to be straight in the line of sight of the pin. It was actually to be where the players were putting their bags. And there was a lot of dwell time there as they were waiting to putt or waiting to do whatever they're doing, or someone's eating, Justin's eating a granola bar on the side, whatever's happening. But we actually saw the most media value and exposure for that particular brand when they put those other items there that were branded. So we would turn that on a 24-hour basis so that as soon as the tournament was over, we'd start analyzing that data, flip it around, and then the next morning we could make that decision on, hey, when the crew's going out, this is where you want to move it to optimize. I think with respect to a couple of other programs, social and digital overlays that were either getting a lot of engagement or you would see something happening in the game and a conversation started. We will definitely be, and we just did a lot of work for the NBC Olympics, for the Beijing Olympics on behalf of NBC Sports, but we will optimize on the fly there too to participate in that conversation and or try and redirect, if you could, through like a really sharp listen and response strategy. Anything else? No? Oh.
Thanks. I saw in there, in terms of the return on the transactional level on one of the slides, is that something that it's another third party, or are you working with the brand itself to observe the actual transaction? How are you closing that last mile?
So we do both. So we may work with the brands to actually acquire that sales data, but that's something we're now pulling in through the Fanai platform and another platform like a Fiserv or Catalina, where we're able to get that sales data in through Fanai, and that's through that audience matching process. Yeah. Otherwise, we do it. When I said I had that page up there with all the blanks on that scorecard and said it could be easier, yeah, we can do it, but it's super hard to do it by ourselves. And frankly, it's really, really hard on the client. And for those of you who do work in brands, sales and marketing sometimes are quite disparate organizations, and it's very hard to get that data. And so we can make it much easier for them and give them exactly what they need versus maybe a national swath and you only need a DMA or whatever that might be.
Thanks, everyone,
Cool.
for coming.
Thank you.
It's all the time we have, but it's a great talk.